Yo, 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 what's going on, everybody? This is a Black Manga Critic here. We are live with another rambling stream. I've been doing a lot of rambling streams lately. That's because, like I've just kind of like needed to talk and do all of that. So it makes sense. But I don't know how long this is going to be. Usually the streams are like tend to be like an hour or something like that, or like a 40 minutes or something like that. So we'll see. It's definitely not going to be like as long as the last rambling stream, because that was more like a sort of close reading and analysis of J. Cole's Snow on the Bluff. I could talk about sort of like No Name's track and kind of get into that and talk about why it's so important. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that, although I think I might reference it just to kind of, talk a bit about the topic. The topic is listening and sort of what that entails. So we're gonna kind of get into that. Folks want to come through, just kind of talk, just like throw out their ideas about things. Feel free to come through. I guess like to sort of start, I would say, I don't know. I'm gonna be very like sort of like chill, I guess, in a way. I'm trying to think like, what do I want to sort of start with? I guess what I want to start with is who you're kind of listening to, right? I think even before you sort of begin to listen, and be aware and pay attention and all those different things, what, people are sort of saying and conveying. To me, it's important, like, who you listen to, obviously. For me, it's really critical at this time that we, especially as men, to, right, like, listen to women, listen to black women, listen to black, right, like, listen to black femmes, like, listen to black non-binary folks. Like, it's pretty crucial work. And there are, like, thousands upon thousands of reasons why, but I think, to me, the most sort of obvious, and I don't even know if that's a word that I can use, because I think it's not, and it might not necessarily be obvious, but I think, for me, let's sort of like thinking about it, it's like, they're being like people are killing them, like what, like white folks are killing them, largely like men, right? Like white men are killing them, white black men, and so, largely cishet white men and black men, so and non-black men, so I think that's sort of the place to start. And again, I'm just kind of like, I'm not kind of like rah rah right now, just because I think it's a very sort of thing. Like, I just kind of, I was having a conversation with my partner, and it was a pretty intense conversation, but it was like a good one, where we just kind of like got to, throw out a lot of thoughts and feelings and stuff, and it was good. It was really good, and I think that was something, that was something that I brought up, just like thinking about these things and thinking about what it means to support black women, black femmes, like black non-binary folks. Like, what does that mean? I think a really big part of that is listening. A big part of that is listening. And I think the reason for that is because you can sort of, right, like, you can do actionable things that you feel like are useful um, to helping people, to helping black women, black femmes, black non-binary folks, like, right, you know, non-binary folks who are offended, right, like, you know what I mean, disabled black folks, like disabled black women, disabled black femmes, disabled black non-binary folks who don't identify as femme, like there's a lot, and but I think, you know, you can do those things, but like, are the things that you're doing actually helpful, or do you think those things are helpful? And the only way that you can know, right, the only way that you can know if those things are helpful is if you are listening. If you're not listening, you're gonna be doing like you're just gonna be doing things, you know. And what I would say is that, you know, if you're doing those things will not sort of like be particularly useful. Like I doubt it. Or well, not necessarily like that they won't be useful, but like they won't be as useful as they could be. And I think what often happens, at least this is sort of what I notice, is like, you know, this is something that I talked about with my partner as well, is like there's a way in which when men, like when we like sort of like try to help, it's a very like it's very aggressive and is not really rooted in like harm reduction, right? That's something that I think that I've been thinking about a lot, you know, and it's something that I've seen black women, black femmes, like black non-binary folks like talk about consistently. I think like if you've been listening, harm reduction is a mode of, trying to think of a good word. Is an actionable sort of like thing, right? That you can do that supports, that helps, and does and seeks to like not harm the people that we're trying to help. So like I think one thing I've noticed is, you know, I know a lot of black men, like, you know, through social media, in my own everyday life, you know what I mean? And I think like it, like, you know, including myself, right? And I think like we have a really hard time just kind of taking things in and hearing black women, black femmes, black non-binary folks, disabled black women, disabled black femme, disabled non-binary folks who don't necessarily identify as femme. Like I think we have a hard time like just taking that in and just like really understanding what's being said, right? And I say that because I think if we didn't have that issue, if we were listening in the ways that we needed to listen, if we could listen in a way that isn't rooted in aggression, in sort of what's the word I'm looking for, right? Like if it wasn't rooted in a sort of like aggression, if that listening wasn't rooted in aggression, if it wasn't rooted in like a kind of like haphazard sort of, you know, sort of call to action, right? And I say haphazard because I think, again, you can have calls to action, but they can be like kind of messy and not useful, and not particularly useful, right? If I'm listening as men wasn't rooted in those things, I think we would be so much better off. But as men, our modes of listening are rooted in that, and so it causes these awful social milieus to propagate, right? And that's like largely right, and that's like directly related to the harm that is right, the brutalization of black women, of right. And when I say black women, I mean like all black women. I'm not talking about just like cishet black women. You know what I mean? Queer black women, trans black women, disabled black women, whether those disabled black women are cishet, you know, trans, like, you know, disabled black femmes, like that is at the sort of crux of it. So I think one thing to sort of think about is when we, you know, and I'm just like, again, I'm thinking through these things, like when we think about, you know, listening, it's like, how are we listening? What is that sort of listening rooted in? Is the type of listening that I'm enacting useful to the people that I'm trying to listen to? That stuff that's really important. I think like as guys, like we don't do that. We don't do that work. We don't have a certain we don't really put in the work in terms of building our emotional intelligence, in building our emotional awareness. I think that's something that like we're like, it's a mess, and then some. So, you know, like, right, when we say, oh, we're listening, we got to think about, like, as guys, like, what is that, like, right, like, what does that even mean to us? What does it mean? You know, what does it mean? And, you know, to a lot of guys, it means I heard the words that you said. Right? To a lot of guys, a lot of black men, a lot of men, just like period. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, we'll have this very particular sort of construction. You know what I mean? Where it's like, we'll be like, okay, even if we get to a place where we even begin to listen, it'll be very like particular and it won't be useful. Right? Shouts out to Tails, good friend of mine, in the chat. They're awesome people. And like, right, it's like, right, like we aren't, like as guys, like, you know, and that's something that they said in the chat, right? It's like, we aren't pushed to listen. Like, listening is not a skill that men are taught in the ways that they need to be taught, if it's taught at all, right? It's like there are layers to it, and it's just so it makes me so angry and frustrated and upset that like there is all this work that has to sort of happen just to get to a place of listening. You know what I mean? Even before we get to the actionable items. You know, like the actionable items that are actually useful to the people that, right, to the woman, right, to the non-binary folks, to the femmes, right, like that right, to the disabled, like folks, right, that we're supposed to be listening to. It's just like, it's so much. Do you, like, and when you right, and when as I'm verbalizing it, it's just like, how, like, not even how, right, like we know the writings are there. Women, femmes, non-binary folks have been talking about this for forever. So that stuff is all out there, right? The writings, the discussions, the roundtables, all that information is readily available, more or less. You know, outside of like, classes, sort of like ideas of access, right? Like those things are available. So for me, whenever I hear guys sort of talk about, you know, a person's tone or anything like that, it's just so absurd to me, because there is so much that as men we are not aware of, and that we're so right. And a big part of that is because of what we have set up, because of the patriarchal um you know social apparatus, right? Like that we've set up. It's like we're like concerned about tone, and we're so concerned about tone we can't even begin to listen, right? We've got all of these excuses, all of these things that we're bringing up to halt any sort of growth on our part, and any sort of real listening, and any sort of movement towards harm reduction, and the elimination of the brutalization of Black women, right? Black femmes, Black non-binary folks, disabled Black, right? Folks, like, it's like, do you understand, like, that all of that sort of, I have to say all of those things because as Black men, we're not even, a lot of us aren't even aware of that. We're not even able to conceive of those issues, and that all of that, like, right? And it's just like, damn, you know? I think that's something for me, like, in the past few years. I think it's something, like, I've been working through these feelings of just like being in this space, and having tried, and this is still something that I work, right, that I work towards, right, every day, because there is no way that I even, like, that I have the right to just be like, all right, you know what, I'm not gonna do this thing, I'm not even gonna bother like, what? So, but thinking back on the number of conversations, and I say conversations because some of those conversations weren't really conversations, they were just people not listening and throwing like ridiculous talking points at me and stuff like that. I think back on those things and I think, like, wow, it's so incredibly sad, and so incredibly disheartening to see how much effort it takes just to get to a place of listening that is useful for Black men. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is so incredibly sad. And it's just like such an absurd reality that we have to waste that much time working on those things, right? To get to certain, so that Black men can get to a certain place, as opposed to focusing, right, and utilizing those energies on other actionable items that could get us to a place of, like, Black liberation. Like, that is so incredibly sad. And it's just so many different emotions that, like, I don't even know how to begin to describe it. It's like I don't know. Right? Like Tails, like, the focus on tone. When it's something that occurs, even, right, like, it happens, like, early, and it's something that obviously, like, we have to change. Like, tone should not be something that we're worried about at all. Like, when it comes to the ways in which Black women, Black femmes, right, black non-binary folks, like disabled black folks, like, right, are disseminating the information that they have gathered and are using to enact change. Like, tone should not be something that we're worried about, but it is. And it's like, and it's so pervasive. It's so pervasive. Like, you see it all over the place. And the thing for me, like, you know how many people I've and I wouldn't say I follow like a lot, but there's some folks I was just, like, where I've just been like, you know what, I've tried, I really have, but nah, you gotta go, because you're not listening in the ways that you need to. You're not even beginning to really try to do that work, and you know, and there were like a couple of people who, you know, and sometimes you have people who follow you and they're just like there to, for reasons, I don't know. But like, it's just a lot. It's just nonsense. It's incredibly unnecessary. It's incredibly unnecessary to waste so much energy for, right? And for black men, right? For the individual who is, right, the oppressor, to request help from the people that they're oppressing, right? Right? Again, it's something that Freire like talks about in the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Like, this is stuff that, you know, it's just bizarre. These are bizarre happenings. You know, and it's even more bizarre when the individuals who are oppressive are concurrently being oppressed, right? And to have that like disconnect occur is so, again, that's the word, the word that I have, bizarre. And I say bizarre because that, not to say that it doesn't make any sense, right? But to say that we understand where that comes from. We understand right? We understand, like, as black men, this desire and being taught to, right, whether advertently or inadvertently, to reenact, right, and to strive for whiteness, right, and white male power, you know, like that, like, but it's, again, this is what I use, like, it's just like, you know, that's why, like, to me, I was, you know, I was thinking about, like, it's just like, again, listening is like, there's so much that is in the way of black men listening that is our own creation. It's like, yo. And I think parts of that are inadvertent, and almost sort of like, right, like subconscious in a way, right? In terms of like being taught that and being, I won't say groomed, that's not the word. Not groomed, but like, maybe sort of like being groomed into that. But like, you know, but there's just so much. There's just so much that stops us from that, right? So again, like some of that, yeah, right, it's inadvertent, and then some of that is very conscious. There were very conscious, active sort of efforts to maintain that, right? And you see that with black men who are, you know, all about black capitalist thought, black neoliberal thought. Like, they love they love that. You know, Jay-Z, Killer Mike, Diddy, LL Cool J thinks he's not about that, but he actually is. He just doesn't realize it because he just is not as well read as he needs to be. He's not even close. But you got LL Cool J on, sports shows and coming on Twitter talking nonsense, like just, So you have folks, right, who do that, and it's just like, ugh. And this is why the tone policing, it's like, and then you have the audacity to talk about how people like No Name and abolitionist scholars and organizers, activists are going about things the wrong way, and their tone is a problem, and they have to adjust, right? It's like, once you begin to be aware, once you begin to become aware of these things, of these projects, right? These apparatuses, these right. Once you become aware of those things, it's like, yo. And this is why whenever I'm on, I'm on social media and I'm on the channel and stuff like that, and I see certain things, I'm like, oh my, it's so incredibly frustrating, because it's like, this is where the only reason I'm where I am now is because of because of the work, is because of the reading, the listening, the conversing, that's the only reason I can even begin to see those things, and to have an idea of my place in all of that. It's just it's and for black men to be like, right, particularly cishet black men, right, but black men generally too, but right, to be like, yes, you are right, we see y'all, and we see that you're being brutalized, right, harmed, abused, killed. But you know what we need? We need you to adjust your tone. It's so, and for black men to just sit in that. To just sit in that. To be like, yes, J. Cole, you already said he was being nice. It's just like a complete lack of awareness, accountability, right? Because like Tail said, right? Right? Because like what Tail said, right? Like what they said in the chat, the patriarchal, right, systems that we are a part of do not make it necessary for those things to be explained, taught to men. So you have these things, it's just like, man, it's a lot. And that's an understatement, obviously. So again, when it comes back to listening, there are so many different things that we have to be aware of as black men, and that we have to, unlearn and understand. And, before we can even begin to listen properly, before we can even begin to take actionable steps, that are actually going to help the people that need it. And I think that's something that I've been trying to be a lot better about. Just being like, all right, if I see, if I see something, someone says something, put it out there. But I think one thing for me, and this is really important, is just like, just being like, there are just days where, I'm be like, you know what, I'm gonna read this thing. I don't gotta be on Twitter right now. I'm gonna go read this book. I'm almost done with the Journey for Truth. That book is incredible. Like, it's definitely one of the better historical explorations of Black left feminism, like Black communism. Like, it's really quite good. And I think a lot of people try to sort of like avoid like sort of like the idea of like essential text, because you want people to read things generally, and you want people to kind of like not stop at the essential text. But I think, to me, if like, that's a book that a lot of people should read. I think it's a book that to me, Black men should read. Definitely. By Eric S. McDuffie. And man. But I think when it comes to sort of listening, it's like there's a lot that sort of comes to that. There's a lot that goes into that, right? It's like, it's not just I heard the words you said, right? It's I'll type it up in the chat. I'm typing it right now. But it's really good. It's really useful, and it's not right, and it's not just useful, right, and it's because like it's not just useful because it sort of goes into a very sort of like extensive foray of Black left feminism from the early 1900s all the way down, but it is just a great job of like highlighting certain figures, like Grace Campbell, right, certain individuals, right, Angela Davis, obviously, like, right, like certain individuals, right, like man, it's just really good. It's really good. And I think that's the thing, right? It's like when we talk about sort of listening, it's like, what are we doing? What is the goal? Is the goal, right? And like, is the goal like centered in this like aggressive like action sort of thing, or is it more so like passive is in a certain way? Yeah, Freedom is a Constant Struggle is dope. Is really good. Actually read that before I had read Abolition Democracy. I had read As Prisons Are Obsolete first. Like, I read those two, like I read Are Prisons Obsolete like a few years ago. Maybe like 4 years ago, something like that. And Woman, Race, and Class I read like in its entirety, like also more recently, but I had read like excerpts from it a while back. And Abolition Democracy I'd read more recently, and they're all good. It's all good. Yo, it's all good. But like, again, like, what is your point? What are you looking for? Are you looking for something for you, or are you looking for something for the person that you're listening to? That I think is very different, right? It's like when I'm listening, I'm like, and that is something I have to catch myself with all the time. I got to be like, do I need to suggest anything? Do I need to give some sort of idea, right? Is that something that the person that I'm listening to is asked of me? It's stuff like that, right? And I think for me, a big thing is like, it's not about me. Listening is not about me in a certain sense, right? Like at its core, listening is not about you, right? It's about the person that you're listening to, right? Right? It's about the person that you're listening to. That's the point. So this is why for me, like whenever I see men on Twitter, social media, YouTube, whatever, they'd be like, oh, I did this thing and, I hear you. But, right, once you hear that, I hear you, but you gotta know that black man hasn't gotten to a place where they can listen in the way that they need to. Because already what they've done is they've come into that conversation ready to have something to say. And what's really hard for us as black guys is to be like, I'm coming to this conversation ready to just really hear, understand what you're saying, and really take that in. And not necessarily have a response or thoughts or some, clever quip or whatever, or stuff like that. That's so hard. That is so difficult, right? This stuff that I deal with every day. Every day I gotta be like, all right, and you're not gonna be perfect you're not gonna be perfect every time, especially if you're a guy. That ain't gonna happen. But it doesn't mean you don't try. It doesn't mean you don't make that effort. It doesn't mean you don't keep remembering those things and you work on it. That's really, 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 really hard for guys to do, because we've been like so conditioned, right, to not care about things generally. To be like, oh, it's whatever. I don't care. And it's something I have to work on all the time. I had to be like, man, to take in things, to hear people, to not have some clever, comment or idea, or to be like the smarter person or whatever. All these things are things that black men have to work on, and there are all these different reasons why, right? There are all these different reasons why, from all these different directions, all these different sources. And black men, we have to work through that. We have to do that work. We do. Because if we don't, we're always going to be coming through on a Twitter thread talking about, y'all didn't even listen to J. Cole, what he said. Even though, right, and we'll say that even as we don't even really know, even as we don't know how to listen. We don't even know how to do that. But we'll claim that black women aren't listening, even as we don't know how to listen. And this is the thing, right? It's like, this is the thing. It's like black guys, right, black men, like, we're just like, man, I gotta be aggressive. I gotta be action, rah. Even if it's calm, even if it's like, right, it's just like, right, calm aggression, calm action. Active. That's, and again, it's really, really, it's a really difficult thing to work with. That doesn't mean that you don't do the work, right? Because it's difficult. But it means that you've got to expect that it's going to take a lot of lifelong work. A lot of work. So you have to do that. You got to do that. Again, you can't be talking about how, oh, y'all aren't listening. You don't even know how to listen. You haven't even begun to work through that. Yet you have the audacity, and it makes sense that we have the audacity because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught to have that audacity, to be like, yo, that's what we've been taught. But it's really hard to be, it's really hard to like look at ourselves. Sorry, my slipper fell off. But it's really hard. It's really hard. And you can't tell yourself that the work is easy because if you start to once you begin to tell yourself that the work is easy, you've already like tripped up. You've tripped up, you've fallen down a cliff, and like, it's hard. It's really, really difficult. But this is the thing for me. And I see it all the time. It's like, and I've had that with conversations with people. It's like, people will be like, I can't understand. And it's like, well, that's because you're probably not listening in the way that you need to listen. That's what that is. And I'm not gonna be like, okay, we're gonna throw your whole body out in a dumpster and just leave you there. Because that's not really what I'm about. Even if I might be like blunt and intense about things, that's not what I'm about. At the moment. That's not to say that I was never that way, but I think at this moment in time, that's not what I'm about. For me, it's like, yes, like I worry about my own self-care and I have to like take care of myself. I gotta take care of myself and I gotta make sure that I'm okay. But it's still work that I feel like I gotta do because I'm not putting that on black women. I'm not putting that on black femmes. I'm not putting that on disabled black folks. I'm not putting that on black non-binary folks. I'm not putting that on black queer folks. No, why? Why would I do that? Right? It is a garbage thing to do, to be like, yeah. Yes, I am the oppressor. Like, yes, I am oppressing you, but you know what? Here, do this work to help me be better. That's ridiculous. Again, bizarre is the word that I'm using. Bizarre is the word that I'm using because it is. It is. And, again, like Freire sort of like talks about that, right? Where he sort of talks about how, a big part of that is related to the maintenance of that dynamic, right? We don't want that, like, right? In almost like, right, in a certain, like, in a very deep-seated sort of way, we don't want those things to disappear. We benefit from patriarchy, so why would we want that to disappear, right? And this is the thing, right? This is why, again, listening is such a key thing, and this is something that I was talking about with my fiance, right? She was like, yo, listening is so huge, because without it, it's rare. It's like incredible. It's like near impossible to have an understanding, any sort of understanding of what work needs to be done. Right? If you're not listening to black women, black femmes, black non-binary folks, disabled black folks, black queer folks, like if you're not listening to them, right? Black trans women, right? Like, I mean, when I say black women, I mean all women. I mean, I include black trans women, right? So like y'all know this. So when I say that listening to them, right? It's like you gotta like there's like they're already, this stuff is already out there. They've been saying this for years upon years upon years, upon decades, centuries. Like this is like, yo, come on. So again, if you're not listening properly, you're not going to get that stuff. You're going to waste time tone policing, right? You're going to waste time focused on the tone of the person that's talking, right? Which is like which we know is like a logical sort of like fallacy when it comes to sort of arguments, right? A sort of ad hominem kind of thing. And we know that, but like, you're gonna waste time doing that when you could like, right, when you could just kind of like listen and take things in and not offer suggestions, right? I'm not gonna be in a webinar with abolitionist organizers, activists, scholars, doctors, social workers, whatever, like, and be like, you know what? Here's a suggestion. That's ridiculous. What suggestion do I have? Right? And it's not that's not to say that, like, you don't matter generally or anything like that, but it's like, what are you even talking about? What are you even suggesting to all of these folks who have done so much work? What are you suggesting? This is why, again, like, going back to J. Cole's song, right? This is why J. Cole's song was so ridiculous, right? There were different ways that he could have approached that, right? And No Name, rightfully so, was like, yo, where are these like top rappers? Like, they're not saying nothing. They're not really talking about what needs to be talked about. She was being very particular, right? And this is what we're talking about, right? There's like things that black men think need to be discussed, and only those things. And then there are all of the other things that are just as important, just as crucial to discuss, to put at the forefront. That's what No Name was talking about. But black men didn't realize that because they're not listening. So of course, to like, J. Cole always talks about black men's plight. J. Cole always talks about, the issues that we have in impoverished communities. J. Cole's like, no, yeah, but what about all the other things that we're constantly talking about out here? J. Cole is not talking about the plight of black trans women in his music. J. Cole is not talking about the plight of black queer women in his music. J. Cole is not talking about the plight of black non-binary folks in his music. J. Cole is not talking about the plight of black disabled folks generally in his music on a consistent basis, if at all, right? Once we sort of begin to see that, right, we can tell, I can see that. I wasn't into J. Cole stuff, and that stuff ain't there. Not in the ways that it should be, if at all. Like, this is what we're talking about. This is why whenever I see black men go, well, you don't hear that. You're not we're not listening. We're not listening in the ways that we need to. So that's why we always got some point to make that is so, it's just so incredibly ignorant. We always have these incredibly ignorant points because we're not listening. We don't know. We don't really know what we're talking about. We don't. I'm learning. That's why I'm trying to be like, yo, I need I need the black men that I know to go read this. I need the black men, like, I need the black men that I know to read that, right? And this is obviously also, like, of course, like, all white people should do those things, right? But it's different, right? They're different sort of like levels, like layers to it and levels to it, right? So this is what I'm talking about. It's like, but I'm focused on black men because this is sort of the one of the issues at hand. There are ways to listen. There are ways to not center yourself in conversations, and there are ways to walk away from a conversation having listened and subsequently beginning to do the work or continuing to do the work that you've already started prior to said conversations. Like it's like, it's, it's a lot. And again, You're gonna trip up. You will. And you have to hold. You gotta hold, like, right. You gotta have, like, people, and people will hold you accountable. You gotta hold yourself accountable. You gotta be like, yo, that was the trip up. You gotta be aware of that stuff because it'll happen. It'll happen. It will. I remember one time I was on this app. Oh man, I was talking about, there was like, right, there was like the whole like chicken noodle soup thing, and like I can't remember the K-pop artist, but they had like made a tribute to it, and shouted out all the art, like the original artists of the song, and the proceeds went to, like, you know what I mean, and the royalties went to like them, and like it was really 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 interesting, and it was really dope, and I went on Twitter like mad, like, man, they not, and I got called out. Folks are like, yo, you know what I mean? They were like, nah, this ain't it. And I had to really, and it's funny because, like, right, and it's funny because, like, I was on my lunch break, and it was like, damn, I was like, damn. And black women K-pop stans, right? Black women K-pop fans were like, yo, this ain't it. This is what actually happened. Blah, 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 blah. Gotta do your research. Gotta do this stuff. And I had to be like, yo, absolutely right. Like, I gotta be like, damn. When, and this is, I still had like some, like, this dude, who I've like long since blocked. But like, even, at that time, even he was like, this ain't it. You know what I mean? Like, when like a dude who you suspect to hold white supremacist ideologies, like, and like sympathies, like, says something like that's like, damn. You gotta be like, damn, I messed up. You gotta hold yourself accountable. People will hold you accountable, and you gotta be receptive to that. You gotta take that. You gotta be like, all right. And you gotta work to be better. So that's why I'm like, now, so I'm much more aware of like certain things, of like how K-pop fans like move and things like that, and reading up on certain stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's just things like things like that. You work. It's work. But again, I keep, and I'm gonna keep emphasizing this. I think, like, right, black men have a really hard time listening, if at all. And when they make attempts to listen, those attempts are always rooted in a very sort of like aggressive, when I say aggressive, I mean like hostile. That's a better word, hostile. Because aggressive could be like, like, right, like sort of like the trope of the aggressive black man, which is like a trash trope, and right, racist trope, right? But like hostile, right? Maybe not even hostile. I mean, sometimes hostile, but like there's an aggressive kind of like, not even aggressive, but like forward, like active. That's a better word for it, right? It's active. I'll stick with that. Active. It's very active. And we just got to be like, all right, I'm here in this conversation, but this conversation, right, and not even conversation, but like me listening, right? Because sometimes it's not even a conversation necessarily. Sometimes it's just you listening to the things, and just like acknowledging in various different ways that you understand what's being conveyed, and that you're working through that in ways that aren't sort of active, and in ways that aren't you sort of like being like, I need to find a solution to this. No. Like, you know what I mean? In that moment in time, That's very difficult. Again, it's very difficult for us as black men to do that, because that's not how we're usually taught. We're usually taught in very active. We're usually taught to be active in certain ways, and to come up with solutions, and to be innovative, and all these different things. But all of those things are not particularly helpful or useful when it comes to listening to black women. Like if a black woman doesn't ask you, You know, well, and well, I would say that. I would say this. I would say this. I would say I wouldn't say like if but what I would say is stop thinking in terms of conflict resolution when you're listening to Black women, and be a lot more passive, not passive aggressive like J. Cole was. Passive, meaning listen, take things in. You know, really, really understand what's being said, what's being conveyed, and work on learning more. You know what I mean? Do more, learn more, you know, on your own time. You know, if you're in a conversation and Black women are sort of telling you, you know, and Black women are sort of telling us, you know, look, I need y'all to educate yourselves. I need y'all to do this. Like, that's not a invitation for you to ask for resources, because they just told you to educate yourselves. This is something I see all the time, like on the TL, like, you know, so you know, someone is saying a particular thing or putting out a particular idea or thought or whatever, and a Black man comes through and or a white guy or whatever is like, oh, you know, where can I look for this thing? You know what I mean? Like, I want to say maybe like a week ago, Ebro was on Twitter talking about what does BIPOC mean, and it's like, dude, you right? One, we know what that is. You know what I mean? We know what that is. We do, but a lot of Black men do not know what that is. They're just like, a lot of Black men just be like, all right, he's just asking a question because he wants to learn, right? But we know what resources are available to someone like Ebro. We know Google exists. We know that he can go and search. There are a whole bunch of different search engines he could use. Whole bunch of friends that he could ask, right? But he's on Twitter asking this question. Why is he on Twitter asking this question? Because he's being a jerk. That's what that is. It's a very passive aggressive sort of way of like not listening. Because if he was listening, he would already know what that means. Right? Because he would have went and done the work on his own. Because Black women, all these folks are telling them, right? Or telling him, yo, go do that. Right? 2 minutes. Like that night, I was looking at that. I went into my web browser, said, all right, typed it in, clicked, searched for it. It popped right up. That took maybe 15 seconds. You know what I mean? So it's like, when we see these things, it's like there are Black men who are willfully sort of like obtuse about those things, and it should be like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Like, I don't know what's happening. You know, stop it. And then some of you do know. Some of us do, right? Some of us do know what's happening, and we're like, it's whatever. But you know, but we know what that is. Like, I know what that is. I know what he's doing. I know the vile and very like disgusting and very sort of like terrible like sort of like underpinnings of that kind of tweet, you know? So that's why I saw that and I was like, this dude's a clown. This is why I think like a lot of Black male you know, cishet Black males who like are at the lead of sort of like, you know, a Hot 97 or 105.1, The Breakfast Club or Joe Budden podcast. They're all trash. You know? Because there are all these different things that they do, and all of it is because they want to maintain patriarchy. That's what they want to do. Because they benefit from it so much. You know, so it's like when you see a tweet like that, and someone's like, what is it? Well, you know, what does BIPOC mean? It's like, no, you're being a jerk here. I know, and I know because these are things that I've experienced before. I've experienced people ask me questions where I'm just like, why are you asking me this question when you could go Google that? And they'd be like, oh, no, I just need a clarification on it. And I'm like, why are you asking me what this thing means? What you like, right? Like, there's a difference between asking me, what does this term mean? As opposed to, I know that these things have, I looked into these things. I looked into this, and this is sort of what I found. And I was wondering if you had thoughts on this, or, you know, because like I'm not really understanding a certain thing. That's very different. You know, I don't mind that, like, because I've had conversations with people where I'm like, yo, this is but just kind of coming up out of nowhere while people are having a conversation about, right, that sea lining, right, where it's just like, right, and you know, there are different types, right, where it's like someone is defending a particular point, right, and then there's those instances where someone is just kind of like, is trying to sort of like, well, I wouldn't say sea lining, but it's like, it's just being a jerk, you know, where if I see a question, I know what it's rooted in. I know what it's rooted in. And so I'll just, like, I'll leave it alone. You know what I mean? There was a person who was like, you know, I said, hey, like, it's Juneteenth, pay all black women what they're owed. That was me. That's what I said. And I said that, and I stood in that, and that's what I meant. And someone was like, whoa now, maybe not all black women. And I was just like, was this even a conversation that I had set up? Was it like, did you not understand that it was a statement? It wasn't a prompt. You know what I mean? For that for you to answer. It wasn't, there was no questioning, there was no question here. There was no, you know, hey, here, what are your thoughts on this statement? I said what I said, and then dude came through and was like, oh, you know, I don't care. I'm not invested in this thought that you have that is erroneous. I don't care about your erroneous thought. I'm not interested. Go talk about that on your own TL or whatever. You're still gonna be loud and wrong, but go talk about that on your own TL. You know what I mean? It's stuff like that. It's very it's like, what was the point? Right? What was the point of coming to my tweet to say that? And there's other instances too where people do these things, right? And I'm like, why are you here? You know? It's like, you gotta start learning, listening. There's a very particular way to do that. Not every tweet that is being said, not every tweet is like asking for a response. A lot aren't. You know? If you like the tweet, you like it, retweet maybe. And if you don't, and the tweet is not particularly like problematic in any way or detrimental to folks, why you need to respond with some like negativity? Why do you gotta do that? It's something like that just bugs me. And those are the people that I know, like, listen but don't really listen. You know, like, they're listening but they're not really listening. They have this very sort of like particular idea of what it means to listen, and you gotta work through that. I think I'm gonna stop here just because I've been talking for like over an hour. It's a lot. But, you know, this is what I'm saying. Just like, there are ways to do it. There are ways to listen. And oftentimes black men are not taught how to listen properly. They're taught to listen in terms of like, you know, okay, you know, like it's in a sort of like carceral classroom sort of setting, right? Where we're like, okay, we're supposed to listen because we need to be aware that the teacher is asking a question and we're gonna have to answer that question, right? And we have to be active, because if we're not, people are gonna look, you know, other students are gonna look at us, classmates, the teachers themselves are gonna look at us and be like, oh, well, you're not oh, I guess you're not particularly intelligent or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's like nonsense. And that's a part of it, right? And of course, the other part of it is like the other big massive part of it, right? There's the other massive parts of it are directly related to maintaining the patriarchal societal apparatus. That's what that is. So we gotta listen. We gotta learn to listen. We gotta relearn. We gotta relearn listening. And again, this is why you see black men on the TL on Twitter, thinking that J. Cole was being nice. J. Cole was not listening, because if he was listening, he wouldn't have wrote a song about how he wasn't reading. You know what I mean? J. Cole heard you. No, he didn't, because if he did, he wouldn't have even put the song out. He would have just went and started doing the work. That's what he would have did. But he wasn't listening, so he was like, oh, now I gotta respond, because that's what I've been taught to do. I've been taught to like hear things and be like, all right, here's my response. You know? And then he got clowned all over Twitter. And then he had his people supporting him, but you know, those people are also clowns. And they gotta listen. They gotta learn to listen. Otherwise, they're gonna keep indulging in clownery. And that's not good. Clownery ain't it. Alright. So I'm gonna get out of here. Shouts out to Cyberdork and Tails for coming through. But this is the thing for me, right? It's like, read. Listen, you know, and listen in a way that doesn't involve you being like active in that moment in time, but is more like taking things in, really hearing what the person is saying, really understanding what the person's saying, right? And not, you know, working overtime to come up with like a solution, unless like the person is like outrightly said, I need your help on this. What do you think? Right? There's like coming to a person for advice and being very vocal about that. And then a person, right? And then women, femmes, like non-binary folks coming to you and being like, I need you to listen. That means those are very different things. You know? Now they're not mutually sort of like exclusive. You can combine those things, right? And you get like therapy, counseling, all those different types of things, right? So, you know, I'm gonna stop there. Thank y'all for coming through to Ramblings number 10, titled Listening. Hopefully this is something that, you know, is useful for all the black men out there who might feel like they need help listening and don't know where they're sort of going wrong in terms of certain interactions with black women, with black femmes, with non-binary folks, with black non-binary folks, with disabled black folks. Like, hopefully it's helpful, you know? If it is, great. If you want to talk, I'm always up for it. Let me know. All right. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get back to manga tomorrow. All right. I will. So thank y'all for coming through. All right. I'm the Black Manga Critic. Shout out to everybody that came through. Tails, Cyberdork, y'all are dope. All right. And I'm going to get out of here. And this is like going to be probably the last ramblings that I'm going to do for a while. I'm going to get back to like the manga. And, you know, I'll talk things out on Twitter and, you know, with my partner and everything like that. But, you know, this was good. I needed this. So thank y'all for coming through. I'm the Black Manga Critic, and I'm out ya.